On this episode of Big Sky Now, we dive deep into the SuperBrawl where we saw Montana State victorious over their arch rival, Montana, and they will advance to the national championship on January 5th to take on Illinois State, who has won a road game every step of the way in their route to try and achieve a national championship. Let's not waste any time and get right to it. Welcome back, everyone, to the Big Sky Now podcast. I am your host, Luke Schmit. Today, I am joined by the one and only Daily Interlake sports editor, Fritz Neighbor, Coeur d'Alene Press sports editor, Mark Nelke, and Columbia Basin Herald sports reporter, Mike Maynard. Guys, we have to jump to it right away and talk about it as we saw one of the biggest rivalries in the country, in the state for sure, come to a conclusion as Montana State will be going to the national championship. And Montana suffers 2 losses this season, both to the Bobcats, and unfortunately their season ends for them. Fritz, I got to jump it out right to you because you were at this legendary game. Talk to me about the environment and all your takeaways from it.
Well, anybody who watched on TV could see it was a great environment. It was an overflow crowd at Bobcat Stadium. The weather was great. I think heard reports that the turf was pretty hard. Casey Kreider and I drove over on Friday and hit some snow, and it was pretty wet snow overnight. Then it froze. So I think the ground is pretty hard, and I think it showed a little bit because there were some injuries in that game. But yeah, it was a great game that swung back and forth and then back again. And the Bobcats couldn't have asked for a much better start. The Griz couldn't have asked for a better second quarter, bridging into the third. Getting a lead. There's a couple times this year they were down 13, the Griz were, and came back and won. Idaho State and North Dakota. In this game, they're down 20-3. Never been down that far, and they came back and took the lead. Scored on 4 straight possessions, led 23-20. And then the Bobcats just retook control and momentum. That was a 75-yard drive that wasn't posed much of a challenge, really. Helped along by roughing the passer call, and now they're ahead. And then from there, the next 3 possessions by the Griz netted 1 first down. That was when Drew Deck got interfered with on a post pattern. And so pretty soon it's 34-23 on the 87-yard, 3rd and 20 catch and run by Taco Dollar. And that was basically it. When that happened, I didn't foresee any way the Griz would come out victorious, and it got worse from there. So kudos to the Bobcats. They racked up a bunch of yards again rushing. Missoula Sentinel's own Adam Jones has rushed for 328 yards in two games against the Grizzlies, against his hometown Grizzlies. He was a huge factor again on Saturday. And I don't know much else you can say. Well, other than that, Justin Lamson, I think he outplayed his counterpart, Kaylee Ayat. He just had a better game, and with his legs and his arm. And yeah, I thought the Bobcats showed that they were the better team and pretty dominant win, except for about 50 minutes there.
You're right, Fritz. It was close for a second, but the 21 points in the fourth quarter for Montana State was too much. And, now that fan base has the bragging rights. As we look throughout history, Montana had the streak, and Montana State's come back in the last 20 years, and it's been pretty tight. But now with this win, the bragging rights are on the Bobcat side, and have an opportunity to go to another national championship under Vegan is huge for that culture. And the 2 words I wrote down, Fritz, is Adam Jones, as when I started my notepad this morning talking about the game. I think he's just a killer for the Griz, and especially being from Missoula and going to Sentinel, it's just a little bit of a thorn in the side. I definitely know it is for that coaching staff and the program. But Mark, I want to get your thoughts here on Montana State going to the national championship and your thoughts on the historic win.
Yeah, like Fritz said, what a crazy back and forth game. Watching that, I thought it was going to be a boat race once Adam Jones, the aforementioned Missoula kid against the Griz, races down the sidelines to make it 20-3. I thought, okay, this is over. And then kudos to Montana for coming back on the road, putting together a few drives and taking the lead 23-20. I thought, okay, the Griz are come in there and beat the Bobcats. And then just like that, Montana State, out of nowhere, just kind of takes command of the game. Like Fritz said, 4 straight drives they score on to win going away. And so crazy game. And it's kind of funny to see some of the stuff on social media now. You guys talked about Montana State kind of owning the rivalry a little bit more now. People talking about, does Montana need to get rid of Bobby Houck? Well, the rest of the Big Sky would love that if they got rid of him, because he's the guy. He came back and brought him back to prominence. So I think that's kind of a silly take. Grizz fans, be careful what you wish for. The only problem is Montana. The good news is Montana might be the second best team in the country. The bad news is they're only the second best team in their own state. So we have that to wonder about. But yeah, very, very good win for Montana State, and good luck in the finals. And another thing they were talking about with Montana State took over the rivalry when they focused on building up their offensive and defensive lines. And so I don't know if that's true, as far as that's the difference between the two teams, or they're just a little bit better. I guess we'll see next year when Montana puts its team together, if they tweak it a little bit to be a little bit different to handle that kind of size on the lines or not. So we shall see. But anyway, it was a fun game to watch. I'm glad it was in quote unquote nice weather. I mean, it could have been in a blizzard. So.
And you're definitely right, Mark. When talking about Montana State versus Montana on the roster side, the Bobcats won the line of scrimmage on both sides. And, Kenneth Eden had 2 tackles for loss. Taden Gray, 2 tackles for loss. Zach Cruz had a sack. So when it came down to that was my key to see if Montana's offensive line could hold up. Unfortunately, they did not for the Grizzlies. And I think that was a big factor, right? Why? Fritz, I'll go back to you based on anything that Mark said. And also, you brought up before the show, the Hawks 2-7 against the Bobcats, so is there a little bit of fire under the seat, or where do you stand on that, Fritz?
Oh, I don't know. I think Mark brought up a good point. I think the rest of the Big Sky would love for Montana to change headman. Bobby Houck is 2-6 this tenure against the Bobcats, which is kind of snuck up on me. He was 5-2 the first time around. He had big offensive lines and stout defenses, and he's had now we're on season 7, and I guess we really haven't seen that return of the big physical, really good O-line. They not once has Montana outrushed MSU in these 8 meetings since Bobby came back. They won a couple of them anyway because Junior Bergen got loose one game, and Big Cliff McDowell kind of ruled the roost a couple years ago. And social media is kind of funny that way, but I did see one thing that I thought was interesting, that, how could you let go of the winningest coach in Big Sky history, which Bobby Houck is, and which makes him the winningest coach in U of M history. But this friend who was obnoxiously hilarious, I should switch that, hilariously obnoxious Bobcat fan, that Rob Ash is the winningest coach in Bobcat history to this point, and he went 2-5 or 2-7 against the Griz, which is why he didn't get to stay for year 10. And since then, thanks to Rob Choate, who Mark repeatedly has brought up, and now Vegan, they've really kind of taken command of the series. So you wonder what might happen. As far as the rest of Big Sky is concerned, yeah, they'd love to see a different coach at U of M. But as for the Cats and a certain segment of their fans, they want to see Bobby stick around. They were chanting his name when it was getting out of hand there on Saturday. They love beating the guy, love it when their teams beat the Griz. So
they definitely love beating Bobby. Fritz, you're definitely right. And it's a little bit of hatred. I know I've gone to a couple of those Bobcat games and seen some funny signs on College Game Day, and they're no fans of the Houck family. But I have to give all the praise to Coach Vegan. 16-12 in his first or in his 5 seasons for the Cats, and 40-2 at home is remarkable. And that's something that just can't be matched anywhere we've seen in recency success. So I think Vegan gets his guys ready to play, especially at home every single week. And I have all the respect. As a Montana fan, I'm a UM alum. I give Vegan, a lot of this credit because he has his quarterbacks every year. They're ready to play. And then especially when it comes to, like we just talking about, offensive, defensive line, the guys they get are from Montana, 1, and 2, they are bigger when it comes to weight. They talked about it on the broadcast, which was really cool that Flathead alum Brock Osweiler was doing it. He noted that the defensive tackles for Montana were so much lighter than what the Montana State offense had. And I think it was over by 50 to 75 pounds. So overall, great program and leader in Coach Vegan, and just wanted to give him his praise because he deserves it for this victory. Mike, let's go to you here. Any thoughts on this one? I know you said you tuned into the game and all of a sudden by the snap of a finger, it was over almost.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that outcome is a little surprising. Maybe not so that the Bobcats won, but just the way that they won. I turned it on and it's a close game, 27-23. I believe Bobcats retook the lead. I saw when I first turned it on that I think the Griz went on a huge scoring run out of nowhere. So I was like, oh, this is fixing to be even more competitive than the last time. And, you blink and then all of a sudden it's a 20-point game again and the other way around. So a little shocking, but, those key players really stepped up again and made the difference. Taco Dowler, Adam Jones, so not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it'll be interesting to see what they could do in the Natty.
Definitely, and we'll talk about it soon. Well, they'll be playing Illinois State, which is not a team to be taken slightly. We'll have some stats on that soon, but a couple notes before we get to that game. I just wanted to note, Montana State is on a 13-game win streak since they had that home loss to South Dakota State. Thought that was notable, and I think there were a couple times in the game where Montana had some opportunities to get back in the game on third down, but as we saw with Taco Dowler on that long touchdown he had in the third, that was an opportunity, and then they had Lamson on 3rd and goal, I believe. And he was able to run the ball in to put the game away. So overall, Montana's defense was in question all year. And I think the answers came out on Saturday as they weren't able to get stops as they were needed to. And the last I want to shout out is just both the Dowler brothers have been amazing this season. Caden Dowler got hurt and wasn't able to return to the game, but his brother Taco, 5 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. And one of the biggest plays, I would say, in Montana history came from Taco on that touchdown because the momentum just carried from there. So overall, have to give the Bobcats their respect, especially, in a dominant fashion and on the biggest stage. But they're not done yet, as Mike just said, They're going to have to take on the Redbirds, who beat Villanova 13-4, and they officially have won 9 straight road games in the FCS. And are 15-1 against FCS opponents in the last 2 seasons on the road. So very remarkable run for the Redbirds. Some would call it a Cinderella. Mike, I'm going to jump it back to you. Just talk to me on your thoughts here on this team. And, they're the team of destiny when it comes to being unranked.
Yeah, I mean, for a Cinderella team, they're probably as white hot as you could possibly get. Just they start fast and they don't let off the gas. I quite honestly am really impressed by that, the way that they just can keep going and not let off the gas. Some of the big things that really stood out to me, like I mentioned last week, Victor Dawson, their running back, I mean, just had an incredible day. Put up 155 yards and a touchdown. I believe it was over 30 carries. I mean, I guess some people have opinions if it's a higher volume of carries and that kind of number, it's not that big of a deal, but I think it is, because clearly that allowed them to open up the pass game a little bit as well. The quarterback showed up. I mean, their first touchdown in the game was a 53-yard touchdown pass. So, they were kind of hitting on all cylinders on offense. And then something that really stood out to me also was their secondary had 6 pass breakups. They were kind of locking down Villanova, couldn't really let them get anything going. And I mentioned last week, 4th down conversions, they went for 1 and they got it, 1 for 1. Whereas Villanova was 1 for 2. And then on 3rd down, this might be the bigger stark contrast. Illinois State 11 for 20, while Villanova was 1 for 10. And we hear coaches from all different programs talk a lot about how important 3rd down is. Whether you're on offense, you need to convert, or you're on defense, you need to get off the field. Illinois State did both of those things. So yeah, they've just dominated. And if I'm a Bobcats fan, Bobcats player, or coaching staff member, I would not overlook this team whatsoever.
I'm with you, Mike. I think this is a team, especially with the road success, they're ready to play wherever. And, looking at their team, they have a veteran-led offense. They have seniors at quarterback. They have 2 senior running backs. They have a stud, Daniel, excuse if I say it right. So Daniel Sopkowitz is 97 yards, 2 touchdowns in his last game. He's a senior as well. So they've got veteran presence all around. Fritz, I'll jump the question over to you. Montana State will be taking on this hot Redbirds team. What are your thoughts on their run?
Well, the Redbirds, as some people are calling them,
I love that.
really played well Saturday. I thought the week before when they beat UC Davis had chances to take that game at home and just didn't make enough good plays or just enough bad plays to allow Illinois State to win. And this one was basically all Illinois State. Villanova drove right off the bat, and then they threw a pick in the end zone or near the end zone. And then the next thing you know, Sopkowitz is how you pronounce it, had hauled in his 17th TD pass of the year. And he wound up with another one. So now he has 18 TD passes. He's huge and a really good receiver, obviously. And, Tommy Rittenhouse threw for 251. He had a pick right before halftime, or else it might have been a worse halftime score than it was. And, they're good. They're the Missouri Valley Conference's last man standing. That conference is still a bully. It'll be a matchup of like teams with MSU and Illinois State. I think you find 2 teams that have they're great up front, and then they find their guys that have the most talent to make plays, and they feed them. Like Victor Dawson, who I think runs every bit as hard as Julius Davis. And it's gonna be a tough one for the Bobcats. They were 10 for 14 on third downs against the Griz Saturday. I don't think they'll be quite that successful against Illinois State's defense, which is pretty stout. I think they're already something like a 9-point favorite, the Bobcats are. But, this is a team, as you mentioned, has just won a bunch of games on the road even before this postseason. So we'll just have to see what happens in Nashville.
Yeah, but if anyone remembers, this team beat North Dakota State, who was the first ranked team in the playoffs. So I don't think anyone's scaring the Redbirds away at all. I think their players have the most confidence, and their coaching staff thinks they can beat anyone, and rightfully so. They've proved it so far in the playoffs. I'm going to bounce back to Mike here. Mike, before I throw it to you, if you want to hit on anything else, I just wanted to mention Victor Dawson has now rushed for over 100 yards in 3 straight playoff games, and it was his 5th time this season, and he had 155 yards against Villanova. So that Montana State defense, who's been playing very well, they're going to have to play well again to bring Dawson down.
Yeah, absolutely. Stopping the run is going to be a key factor for them. But I also wanted to mention that maybe Montana State should pay attention to how their Illinois State's run defense is. I wanted to mention that Villanova's running back was 11 for 59 yards, 11 attempts for 59 yards. While that might not jump off the page, his average carry was 5.5 yards, which, is pretty efficient. So maybe Villanova is thinking to themselves, maybe we should have ran the ball a little more, and maybe Montana State should think about how they could take advantage of Illinois State's defense in the run game.
Definitely, Mike. I'm going to give the floor over here to Mark. Mark, how were you feeling about the Redbirds advancing over Villanova?
Well, I was very happy to see the final score as for reasons we talked about last week. So, kudos to Illinois State. We've talked about this before. They lose their final regular season game at home by 30 points, and then they win 4 straight games in the playoffs, all on the road. Now, granted, going to wherever they went last week and going to UC Davis isn't the same as going to Montana or Montana State, but they did go into Fargo and beat them. So that says something. We've talked about their running back, Dawson. He's obviously a load. Their quarterback, Rittenhouse, is good, and they have 26 seniors and to Montana State's 9. So there's a lot of experience there. They're not going to be they're not going to be awed by playing Montana State in the title game. So it's going to be an interesting. Montana State's going to have to focus on it. They can't just assume because they beat the Griz that it's over, and this will just be a coronation.
You're definitely right, Mark. I think this matchup's it's got both sides, to be honest. You know, I think you have a team that's coming in as the underdog. They're fine with being the underdog. And then you have the Montana State team who's won all these games in a row. And, you know, especially with that defensive line with Kenneth Eden, I think is going to be a problem for Illinois State, as it should. As Fritz said, I think it came out as 9.5 point spread so far for the Bobcats to be favored. As the game this year will be in Nashville. It's usually in Frisco, Texas, but they're doing renovations this year. So next couple of years, we'll have the national championship in Nashville. Fritz, I'm just going to throw it back to you here. We'll talk about a little bit of the national championship matchup again, and then we'll get out of here since we'll do a deep dive next week into a full breakdown of the national championship. But, you know, Fritz, I wanted to ask you, with an underdog coming in and such a good coach on the other side, you know, where do you kind of stand on that kind of balance?
Well, you know, I don't think there's much of a case of underdog overdog in these games. You know, I go back to 08 when the Griz went down and beat #1 James Madison, and just an amazing game in the semifinals. And then they turned around and were, you know, granted they were pretty flat, but Richmond won 24-7. I didn't think Richmond had a chance to beat the Griz that year, and it happened. So you just can't take the other team lightly. This Illinois State team is kind of doing what the Bobcats did in, I believe it was 2021, when they lost to the Griz and Missoula, and then they changed quarterbacks to Tommy Mellott, and they got on a run in the playoffs and made the national title game, and had to win twice on the road to do it. Not 4 times, but a couple times. So, you know, the Redbirds, as I like to call them, they're for real. And you just can't take a team lightly, especially a team from the MVC.
Mike, any final thoughts you wanted to get out about the national championship preview? And, you know, before you start, I just wanted to hit on, forgot to say about the Cat Griz game. You know, the duo of Jones and Davis has proved to be more dangerous than Eli Gilman, who was the Big Sky Offensive MVP of the year. So just wanted to mention that for the Cats fans, that I know all year they were preaching that they had the better ground game, and they did. So I forgot to say that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how this plays out. I guess I'm still assessing who I'd pick to win, but can't lie, it's going to be really hard to pick against Illinois State the way that they're playing and the things that they've done. I mean, you pass all those tests, how could you not, you know, want to see them kind of finish that story? But yeah, it'll be interesting.
And Mark, we'll end it with you, your final thoughts, and then I'll give a synopsis here of the game, and we'll get out of here.
Well, I mean, I know they have cable back in Illinois, you know, or streaming services or whatever they call them these days, satellite television. So, but I think what'll help Illinois State is maybe they don't look at Montana State the way we look at Montana State. So they're not gonna come in as concerned about them as maybe some teams that know Montana State really well. Besides that, like, they've already won 4 games on the road in the playoffs, one of them at North Dakota State, which was the #1 seed. So I think, you know, they'll obviously respect them and prepare for them, but I think they're not gonna be afraid of Montana State.
And Fritz, I'll let you, anything to add to that?
Oh, you know, I just want to mention something about, you know, the Brawl, the SuperBrawl. Is that, you know, we've mentioned time and time again about Davis and Jones. And then, you know, I think once again, it was a case of the opposing team finding their guys and getting them the ball. And once the Griz took their lead, it just wasn't happening. You know, they managed to give Gilman 3 more carries. They gave him very few carries to start the game when they fell behind 20-3, which surprised me. And, you know, being able to keep the ball and get down the call sheet, that was pretty critical to the Griz, and they did it for about a quarter of that game, and it just wasn't enough. And I think that's been a thing that's happened to them in their big game losses. They just haven't been able to get their studs the ball enough.
And overall, you know, recapping the Montana season, it was a historic year offensively, as Keely Ayat, Michael Wortham, FCS, all-purpose leader, And overall, you have the running back with Gilman, Stevie Rocker Jr., and then our receiver, Brooks Davis, who I forgot to mention got hurt in the game Saturday. He was a great freshman this year for the Grizz. Excited to see what he does if he comes back, especially on the other side. We had Drew Deck have a great year. He's from Glacier here in Kalispell, so shout out to him. But overall, it was a great season for Montana. They defeated everyone that they needed to besides their arch rivals. And in the end, that loss that came in the first Brawl the Wild ended up hurting them because they had to go down to Bozeman, and the momentum there is unreal. It's the last 10 years, Montana hasn't been able to do it. And the Bobcats are being able to have the opportunity to play at home, and that takes them to the national championship. So they set themselves up for success. And ever since they had that tough schedule in the beginning of the year with Oregon and South Dakota State, I think it really mattered in the outcome. And once again, just shout out to Coach Vegan for having his guys ready every single time at home and having his guys ready to play in another national championship. But that's going to be all the time we have today for Big Sky Now. Next week, we are going to do a big deep dive into the national championship, talking about who we pick on the games and maybe talk about some stats we predict. But until then, I just want to thank my panel for joining me each week, doing a great job with all their research. And we will talk to you guys next week about the national championship in Nashville.
Accidents happen. If you're injured, the costs can be insurmountable. You need someone on your side. Trust Van Law. You'll get the representation you deserve as we guide you every step of the way. We handle a wide range of cases, and with our knowledge and local experience, we'll successfully resolve your challenge to get your life back on course.
I'm Jordan Van.
Call us now at 406-VAN-LAW. That is 406-826-6529. Or you can find us online at vanlawfirm.com.
Van Law. Legal representation you can swear by, not at.
M&C Tire in Kalispell has been locally owned since 1979. From urban avenues to untamed trails, M&C Tire will help you conquer any terrain. Unleash the power within your ride. Stop into M&C Tire at 1271 North Meridian Road in Kalispell or mnctire.com. M&C Tire, wherever you go, we've got you covered.